Hi, everybody. We just heard about the importance of stories, of narratives, and I think this is very true if we want to take the circular movement from a number of really great stories, from projects that are doing good impact in certain parts of the industry and the economy, to becoming the new mainstream of the economy. Because we really don't have any more time for just doing projects. We need to think about a full transformation of the economy. So how can something so ambitious, so enormous be achieved? You need new narratives, and these narratives need to be grounded in concrete reality. Because a philosophy typically is not strong enough to convince people that are as pragmatic as people that are running companies, that are farmers, that are living on the ground, need to feed their families, and tens of thousands of people working in their organizations. So how do you go and find the concrete narrative that is grounded in success so that others want to follow you? So this is what we will look at today. We will look at concrete solutions that show that another economy is not only theoretically possible, but already happening. And at its core, it has what we call regenerative value creation. Something that integrates the regeneration of people and nature with business success and economic development of regions. And how did I get to this? 40 years ago, I was the co-owner of an industrial group of companies. We were doing business between Europe, the US, and Southeast Asia. And when I started to help run the company, I wanted to make it sustainable. And what I realized is that you can't really do that if the system doesn't change around you to help you do it. What do I mean by the system? Markets. The different market participants need to want products that are constructed different. Investors want to invest with you. Talent needs to want to work with you. And of course, you also need policy, legislation, tax systems to move towards creating the conditions where it becomes the new normal to be circular, or as we say, regenerative. Why not circular and sustainable? Why do we have to add another word to it? If you really take it by the meaning of the word, to sustain is if you have already a good system and you sustain it. If you have our current situation, then you need to actually regenerate all the systems of life, the different systems of nature and of society, even our own sense of meaning, of well-being. And so only when you bring back that regeneration can you then sustain and dynamically sustain, because evolution keeps evolving, keeps moving forward. And only when the systems are healthy will also the evolutionary drive kick in fully and take us to a healthy state of the economy and society. So I realized that I cannot do this in my company alone. So I brought together many companies, owners and leaders of companies that also had the same passion for moving towards sustainability. And at first, we fit into a few rooms like this around the world. And the wonderful thing that should give us hope is that this movement has grown to so many people you don't even know how to count them. However, it is still not the new mainstream. So now we are a very big fringe movement, you could say. Now the next step is how do we get into the core strategy of companies and countries? Because at the moment, circularity is not yet really well understood by most people in companies or in countries. They do not understand it so that every day they implement it in their actions. And only if they do that will we move towards a new economy, a new way of doing business. And for that, we also need to help people and companies and countries to see that this makes also business sense, economic sense. Because if this is just seen as being good, then it will stay where it is right now, a very nice fringe. But if you want to move it into the center of action, you need to have this integration of positive impact and economic success. And this is why at the moment, if you look at the core strategy of most companies in the world, sustainability, regeneration, circularity, human rights, all of these things are not yet in the core strategy. They are talked about widely, but they're not acted about centrally. So we want to go through some examples, and I shared already, like for example, there's a big industrial company, Philips, that you all know. They are an excellent example of circularity in a very big scale. Now, even there, we still have to bring it into the organization. So my foundation, that is a partnership of over 100 partners that are all part of this transformation movement for decades, is helping Philips to see not only how can they be circular and regenerative, but how can you bring it to 80,000 people working there and the millions of people in the supply chains around the world. How can they really grasp this to implement it? If you think about that challenge, you have to face the fact that this is also a human dimension challenge. This is not only a new technology that you can rationally communicate. People have to become this. And you see that, for example, in another company from Brazil that's a global cosmetic brand called Natura. They are distributing their products to 4 million women, micro-entrepreneurs, whose life completely changed as a result of being part of this company. So you could look at it at a shampoo company, or you could look at it at one of the biggest women's empowerment movements around the world. So again, without the human dimension, there cannot be the success that these companies are having. And this is even more so true if you think about the transformations of regions. So we are working, for example, in the Amazon, moving towards a regenerative economy in the Amazon. You have to think about there are 30 million people there that have to feed their families. How can we get to really regenerative jobs that make more money with the trees standing than with the trees falling? This is a human challenge, the cultural challenge, and not just a technological challenge. The same is true for agriculture. You spoke today already to that with climate farmers. We need to get millions and millions of farmers around the world to change their way of doing farming. We are helping with this, as we do in the Amazon, by, for example, helping 1 million women farmers in India to double their income through regenerative agriculture, transitioning, therefore, because of this economic benefit from chemical farming to regenerative farming. And now we are bringing this to other countries around the world. And this brings me also to Jaqueline Illy, who comes from the coffee brand that you very well known, in the third generation.
Hopefully.
But I think there is a very key aspect because she and her sisters, with her new company, Amarey, are taking not just a circular, but an upcycling approach. They're taking coffee waste to make beauty products out of it. Tell us your story.
Thank you, Walter, and I am very excited to share my story with all of you here today. So, we are Amarey. And who is Amarey and what does Amarey do? Amarey is a bioscience company built to enhance the power of the Coffea arabica plant in the cosmeceutical and nutraceutical industries. So what we really do is we extract active ingredients from the coffee plant to create the first skincare line based on regenerated coffee extracts. But at the same time, these proprietary active ingredients that we extract are also commercialized in an industry as clean substitutes, of course. Very big premise here to say. Commercialized in an industry that is still too heavily reliant on extractive and virgin resources. So what we're doing here is we're putting two pieces of a puzzle together. On one side, we have that we drink 2.5 billion coffee a day, and to produce that coffee, we only use 10% of the coffee cherry. Now, the coffee cherry is the fruit of the coffee plant. And on the other side, the second missing pieces of the puzzle is the fact that the coffee plant is one of the richest and most powerful sources of antioxidants found in nature. If we relate it and compare it to commonly known superfoods as grapes or as blueberries, we find out that the antioxidant contents of coffee is 9 times higher than grapes and 2 times higher than blueberries. And for us, that doesn't mean collecting waste, because waste is not what we call it, it's opportunity. Coffee, again, is made out of the coffee bean, and the rest is also, very luckily for us, the part of the plant that has the highest concentration of antioxidants. So that's what we're doing here today. We have been working on this project for 10 years now. It's us three sisters. We are partnering with the University of Coffee in Trieste, and we are leveraging also their heritage and more than 40 years of proprietary research, and the results are simply incredible. This is just a start, and I am very curious to know where this will end, because what we are finding out is simply extraordinary, and it would represent a systematic change for the cosmetic industry. Because, just to give you a little brief examples of what this could mean, we understood that based on our research that the coffee oil can represent a substitute as for palm oil. So there's still a lot to work on, but very happy to be here, yeah.
And part of what you're discovering also is, again, the importance of the human dimension in the work that you're doing. Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, to tell you about that, perhaps I will just start with a brief genesis of how this project started, because the human dimension really is our family story. We are a coffee family, we love coffee, and we grew up as three sisters in the world of coffee. When we used, this is a personal anecdote, if we want to call it this way, we used to spend our family holidays sailing 2 weeks, rarely going ashore. And so, imagine our parents, they had these 3 kids, very young, 3 girls, by the way, so messier than boys, that had to reduce waste as much as possible. And so for us, it was a game. We took it as a challenge. We got very creative, but one thing truly always stayed constant, the fact that every morning we collected the spent coffee grounds from our mocha to then create the body scrub with which we would wash our day off in the evening. So let's picture this. It's a sunset time. It's us 3 sisters sitting on a white boat deck. Next to us, there is a vase of brown coffee scrub. And you know my father. You probably would expect to understand his face and knowing exactly what would have happened. And so, yeah, that was our very first, since we were kids, beauty ritual. So it's imprinted in us. Like, we started this project because it's in our DNA, because it's in our family story, and we would in no other way do it with a heavily ethics in the imprint, because that's what we've learned how to do from the very early stages. And here I have to thank no other than my family, right? We are hyper obsessed with, to get to the real deal of it, we are hyper obsessed with local supply chain. We are made in Italy, but more than made in Italy, we are made in just 3 regions adjacent to each other in Italy. But our ambition is to scale to produce impacts the furthest away from us. And here I'm specifically talking about the coffee farmers. Because what we do, if we're able to scale this right, is we would be assuring an extra income to farmers because we would be buying more coffee parts, more parts of the coffee plant. So rather than just the bean for coffee, we get the pulp, we get the silver skin, we get the flowers, we get the leaves, and we use it in cosmetics and nutraceuticals. We just went to, this is an interesting point, talking about the human dimension. We just went to Costa Rica together as 3 sisters to visit the coffee farms, and we were very sad and angry, I would say, also to realize that and to learn that the younger generations wouldn't want to continue the family traditions of being coffee farmers. And this, we understood, was because they weren't proud of their job, they weren't excited about the future possibilities, and they didn't understand the value, to your point earlier, they didn't understand the value of their role in society. And this, to me, we came back home with a big responsibility in understanding that it's our task to bridge this miscommunication gap throughout all of the supply chain. So we must be sure that farmers understand their role in today's society and that they feel part of the project rather than a distant pinpoint far away from a bigger picture scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With this, I want to shift to Laura Santucci, who was the Chief of Staff of the political operations at the Obama White House, and also later Chief of Staff of the World Food Program and other political operations. And so why are we having her here along with the business examples is because I think we will not change into a new economy if we don't work very closely with governments and public policy and find together solutions that really work. And this actually has a lot to do with the human dimension also, because often there's such a cultural divide between people in government, people in civil society, people in business. There isn't really enough conversation and enough solutions being co-created. So, Laura, you helped, for example, to take the healthcare law from a great idea that several Democratic and Republican administrations had before you actually took it to implementation into a law that served 30 million people that were uninsured to actually have health care, which in America, for those of you who don't know, mean if you get sick, you might end up being homeless. So this was a tremendous achievement. How did that work? How could you bring about such a fundamental systems change?
Thank you, Walter, for the introduction. As Walter mentioned, I was in the White House Office of Political Affairs, and what we implemented, really in what we call politics, there's sort of an inside-outside game when you're looking to enact significant legislation, significant policy change. And our team was responsible primarily for the inside game. What does that mean? It means identifying what are the votes that you need in order to secure passage, and doing the mapping of the stakeholders of each individual lawmaker and legislator, what motivates them, what incentivizes them to move. And what we understood was that those conversations weren't going to be impactful just sitting in Washington, D.C. We went to the backyards in the home states, the home districts of all, let's say, the swing votes, and understood which relationships, which stakeholders were they listening to, where did the influence lie in their own backyard, what would motivate them, what were the incentives. So you do the mapping one by one from the largest employers in the district to the key community leaders, and you really learn the pressure points and the incentives to motivate. Then there's the outside game, which is working with a coalition of stakeholders from industry, healthcare providers, unions, to also generate the public will. There's the political will and the public will. And in this instance, it was the public will which also allowed the lawmakers to be courageous and take that vote and vote yes. An act that had dodged, as Walter mentioned, previous presidents, both Democrat and Republican. And one of the key, let's say, ingredients of our success was certainly in our execution. You know, you could have a great strategy, but how are you actually executing on that strategy? And I'm reminded that significant change really often occurs with the smallest of margins. We also saw that in the last year with President Biden and his historic climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. 51 to 50 is how that vote passed. So what does it take to move somebody from 49 to 50, 50 to 51? And it's understanding the stakeholders within their community and also building the public will, as I mentioned, with multiple stakeholders.
We don't have much time, but say something about sausages.
Well, you're referring to the saying, which is, you know, politics is messy, and it's often compared to making sausage. It isn't pretty at all, but it sure tastes good. So, you know, winning not just President Barack Obama's historic election and re-election, but also implementing on the vision and the commitments that he promised the American people tastes pretty good.
And of course, it's a global taste, and it's a taste that had to do with the story, right? Yes, we can. And then we did. And I think this is the important thing, that we have to combine the concrete action with the concrete story and how much detailed strategy goes into it. So it actually is rocket science, and I dare say much more important than rocket science. So we are running out of time, but we would love to meet with you, talk to you, so we all co-create with, as I said, over 100 partners and many alliances and organizations, and so the Future Economy Forum. And we are looking to collaborate for these large system transformations. And I think that one great opportunity is for all of us to be present and active and supportive of COP28, which can be a very frustrating idea because you give 200 nations a veto, and then you're surprised that not so much happens at that official level. But there are 80,000 leaders from civil society, government, business, science, and so coming together. It's an amazing moment to co-create change. Also, I think we really need to think about the Global South much more, and to see how can we create from the coffee cup all the way to the farmer in Costa Rica, and especially also the young farmer in Costa Rica, a narrative and a reality that motivates everybody to work towards this regenerative economy. And with this, we have 9 seconds left. So we'll end here. Thank you.